The world of mental health is full of paradoxicalities. It's absolutely chock-a-block with paradoxicality. In fact, it might even be full completely of paradoxicality and made up of nothing else. And yet the strange thing about that is that when we're studying to be whatever type of mental health professionals it is that we're studying to be, I don't think the word paradox is even ever mentioned, not even in passing. When I was studying to be an occupational therapist, I don't remember paradoxicality ever being mentioned. Now, admittedly, I wasn't a great student and I could have been dozing at the time, or maybe I didn't turn up to the appropriate lecture. But I'm pretty sure that none of the courses that supply mental health workers, whether it's social workers, psychologists, nurses, OTs, or whatever the hell, I'm pretty sure they never use the P word. Certainly, and when we get to the point where we're qualified and we're actually working in the field, certainly nobody ever uses the P word. I mean, I've never heard anyone talking about paradoxicality. I honestly haven't. I really can't remember. I might have heard and forgot, but I actually can't remember anyone talking about it. Now, that's okay if paradoxes don't feature so much in this realm, this psychological realm of well-being and non-well-being. But that just isn't the case. No matter where we turn, we're face to face with a massive, great paradox. And the examples are unending. And I'll give a few examples just to show that I'm not bullshitting you. Like relaxation. Relaxation is a big feature in mental health, in psych hospitals. There's always relaxation sessions and that kind of thing. It's always relaxation exercises and little things we learn, progressive muscular relaxation, etc. But the paradox here is that as soon as I try to relax, that trying to relax is itself the opposite of relaxation. It's actually straining, it's actually stress, it's actually pressure, sense of obligation. The exact opposite of relaxation. And the reason it's the exact opposite of relaxation is that when I set out to relax, I'm giving myself a task. So how can I relax if I've got a task ahead of me? That's not relaxing. Now we might say, okay, that's just splitting hairs, because when we do actually engage in the tasks, the end result of that is relaxation. But it isn't. The end result of straining or stretching or doing some procedure is never, ever relaxation. It's always something else. There is no way to relax on purpose. There's no way to deliberately relax. Because relaxation's a non-doing. It's when we're not doing anything. Then we're relaxed. When we're not trying to change anything, when we're not trying to achieve any goal. Which sounds, in our society, that sounds very disreputable. What? You're not trying to achieve a goal? What's wrong with you? Are you lazy, or you're just giving up on life? You're despairing? Where's your goal, man? Where is your goal? Where are your goals? So that's the whole theme that we keep on going about in mental health. We love goals so much, and the idea is that when we get to the goal, that'll be good. But relaxation isn't a goal. Being relaxed isn't a goal. It's when we let go of our goals. Well-being isn't a goal. Well-being comes when we stop trying to achieve things. Now, I'm not saying that we just have to sit on the sofa and never try to achieve anything. I'm not talking about life in general. Life in general requires a lot of straining and struggling and trying to achieve things. Even getting out of bed's an effort. Even that takes strain, more often than not. Buying food in the groceries, bringing it home and cooking it, it's all an effort, generally speaking, unless we really, really love cooking and shopping. But I'm not talking about general life, such as chopping wood in order to have firewood for a fire. I'm talking about mental health, because that's what I'm talking about. It's a kind of that's a specific focus of what I'm talking about here. Now, straining and forcing don't have a place in mental health. And the rest of us, when when we have not ever had our attention drawn to the facts of life, of being mentally unwell, we get by straining and struggling and having that kind of attitude where we just got to bulldoze our way through it no matter what. And it works, because in everyday life, if you've got that attitude, you get things done, you accomplish things, etc., etc. So when we see our brethren who have got mental health difficulties, we automatically assume, in a remarkably stupid way, that it's because they're not straining and struggling and bulldozing their way enough. So we have to give them a pep talk, tell them, keep on struggling, keep at it, old chap. We won't say old chap unless we happen to be old school English, of course, but it's whatever equivalent there is. But anyway, to come back to relaxation, lots of times people in a psych hospital will say how unrelaxing it was because they felt the pressure to relax in a relaxation session. Now, if you and I go to a relaxation session and listen to whatever it is you have to listen to, the chances are it will be lovely and relaxing. Not if you've got anxiety, though. If you've got acute anxiety, it's just extra pressure in a world full of pressure. So if I suffer from anxiety, I live in a world of pressure. I live in a pressure world, pressure cooker. Everything's pressure. And along with this pressure is this deep-seated feeling that I'm not able to do whatever I'm pressurized to do, and that's anxiety. So then if I start to pressurize myself to be relaxed, a bit more relaxed, that's just another straw on the camel's back, really. If I try and pressurize myself not to be so anxious, that's the final straw. It's just more pressure. Pressure's all we know, though. If pressure doesn't work, double the pressure. Turn the screws. Get a bit more pressure. Surely if we have enough pressure, that'll break through, because that's our paradigm. That's the only trick in our book. Try to do the thing, and if the thing doesn't work, try harder. That's the only thing in our book. Or maybe we might say, okay, drop that thing and try another thing, but it's all the same. Because doing the thing is doing the thing. It doesn't matter what the thing is. Doing the thing is doing the thing. It's purposeful action. It's goal-oriented action. It's straining. It's forcing, whatever you want to call it. It's trying to make things be what they're not. So that's one example of how, when we say relax to ourselves, we actually mean don't relax. That's a paradox. Now, in everyday life, everyone tries to be happy. We put pressure on ourselves to be happy and living a fulfilling life like we think we're supposed to be, because it's kind of like we're a loser if we don't. And so the more we get into that trip, the more miserable we get. So if we say to ourselves, in a manner of speaking, if we say to ourselves, be happy, we become unhappy. There's another paradox. And probably the best example would be in meditation, that we have the idea that, okay, meditation's about having peace of mind and not being plagued by stupid, wretched, crappy, repetitive thoughts 24/7. That sounds good. We don't want to be plagued by those thoughts. Why would we? They're totally stupid and they don't do anything apart from erode the quality of our life to an extent that there's no actual quality left hardly. So meditation seems like, okay, not so many thoughts. But if we have an intention in a meditation session to not have thoughts, we automatically have more thoughts, because a thought, the intention itself is a thought. All intentions are thoughts. So intending to have no thoughts is another thought on top of the big pile of thoughts. And if I have the intention to have no thoughts, plus some ideas about how I might go about this, those ideas are also thoughts. So I've got a whole heap of thoughts. And again, we might say, okay, but yes, but these are special thoughts. These are thoughts that if we act on them, they will bring peace of mind. They will bring absence of thought, beautiful serenity, like a cloudless blue sky, as they always say. But no, there's no thought in the world that leads to no thoughts. There's no method in the world that leads to peace of mind. Thoughts lead to more thoughts. And the conflict of trying to get things to be the way we want them to be just leads to further conflict and further conflict. So there is no way to purposefully meditate. And really, that's just another way of saying there's no way to deliberately not do, or no way to do not doing. And going back to the last episode, when I was saying that not doing, the self can never not do. So it brings us back to this same point. And then we feel demoralized by all this, by all this, because it's like, well, what the hell can we do now then? What are we to do? What in God's name are we to do? What do you expect us to do? You've taken the very ground away. You've taken the carpet from under our feet away. And what are we supposed to do? How is this helpful? Because we don't think it's helpful. We like the stuff that sounds good, but which is actually nonsense, rather than the stuff which isn't nonsense, but which sounds terrible to us. That's kind of what we like, really. But in order to answer this question, we really do need to understand what the self is, what we call the self is. And the self, even though we don't experience it as such, is a kind of an act or face we pull. It's a deliberate presentation, which becomes so habitual, we don't realize it's deliberate. We just think that it is who we actually intrinsically are. And another way to talk about the self is to say that it's my definition or understanding of myself. So that's a good way of approaching the subject. So if I define myself, what that means is I settle upon a particular destruction which I champion as the correct description. So it's highlighted, it gets a tick as being true or right or valid, and everything else gets discounted and pushed into the background. So all definitions work like this. We raise up one particular way of looking at things and put it in a place of prominence, a place of glory, and we push down all the rest. So this type of relief, the way that we have chosen, is then emphasized. It sticks out at us, and it has a positive existence. And the reason it has a positive existence is because everything else is repressed or denied. So it's a trick. We are turning a blind eye to everything else apart from the one description that we have designated the official, true and proper description, and that makes that description stand out, but it doesn't make it real. It doesn't make it real because it's only standing out because we've done this thing. We've put the effort into repressing everything else, pushing everything else back down. So, this definition that we have created by repressing everything else is the self as we know ourselves, or claim to be, or say we are, or introduce ourselves as being. But by what we've just said, it's clear that this self is an exercise in doing, because I've had to repress all other ways of looking at things. If I ever stop repressing, then that's the end of that particular thing, because the natural situation is not for one description to be elevated above all others. And that really is the bottom line, the natural description of anything, whether it's me or the universe as a whole. It is a superimposition of lots of different states, none of which are favoured. So that's the fundamental state of existence, the unbiased state where all possibilities exist just the same, where everything is true and therefore nothing is true. It's a state of fullness. And that's not an artificial state, because I don't need to squeeze it to get it to be like that. That's what it's like. That is what it's like by itself. It's full of all possibilities, but none are stated. It's not just this is the true situation and the true description or statement, and all the rest are false, heretical, dangerous, which is a polarity, good and bad, right and wrong. So polarities are always artificial situations. So given the fact that we're in this situation of identifying with one particular description of ourselves, which we've forgotten is only one particular description that we've actually opted for. Or maybe I should just say that in a simpler way and just say, given the fact that who I think myself to be is a position that I'm deliberately taking, a role that I'm taking upon, a mask that I'm wearing, a doing. Given that, nothing that mask or persona does can ever be a not doing. The not doing was there in the beginning. So the not doing is when no particular definition is emphasized, and no particular course of action is emphasized over any other. So then the not doing is there anyway. The not doing is there before we decide to identify with a particular format, a particular mask, a particular way of presenting ourselves. So obviously, when I do take that step of hitting upon a particular form of that is to be emphasized, a particular thing which I'm going to say is me, obviously once I've done that, there's no way forward to peace. There's no way forward to the end of conflict, the end of the polarity of struggling right against wrong. The only way to find that peace is to stop, to go back to how we were beforehand, the prior state, which is the natural state, the innocent state, the uncontrived state, or what's called the Tao, the natural way of things. But I'm in a trap now. I'm in the sneakiest trap ever, because if I do try to go back, I try to go back deliberately on the basis of who I think I am, because I don't have any other, that's all I've got. So this is an irreversible process that we're talking about. I can't go back on purpose. And that might seem a little bit kind of philosophical, but it's very practical. It's like saying that I, as an adult, cannot go back to being a child by some kind of artifice, by some kind of effort, or by some means. If I do go back to being a child, it will be an adult's understanding of what a child is. It will be an adult trying to simulate or approximate what they understand to be a child. Therefore, this child, so-called, is a artifice. It's an artifact. It's a trick of the adult. So even though in some ways I could maybe mimic being a child in some kind of crude way, a parody really, the fundamental essence is different because I'm doing that on purpose in order to achieve an end. Obviously, I'm not trying to achieve an end because I wouldn't do anything unless I think there's some kind of payoff for it. The self never does anything unless there's some kind of payoff. That's its mechanics, that's how it's wired. So if I, as an adult, think it's going to help me to be a child, I might try to be a child. But actually, that is the result of my trying to be a child, yes, is, as I have said, utter parody. It's a horror story. We can all grow up and allow ourselves to be contaminated by the adult world and corrupted, is a better word, and sullied and all those type of words. It's easy to go from a child, you just go along with the flow and become an adult. To go back, it's not so easy. In fact, there's absolutely no way to deliberately do it. How the hell do you do it? How does a contrived state go back to being the natural state? And obviously it can't, because the contrived state can never go on to be anything other than contrived. It can just add further complications, further curlicues, further whatever you might want to say, embellishments of contrivance. It gets worse, in other words. The contrivance contrives to be non-contrived, and then contrives to fool itself that it isn't non-contrived, but it actually is something natural. It's a horror story. So that is irreversibility. And really, if we are genuinely talking about mental health, we're not talking about becoming super equipped adults with lots of tricks and lots of contrivances and lots of ways of somehow avoiding the futility and lack of spontaneity that is inherent in the adult state, the self-defeating futility of doing everything for a purpose and never being able to escape one's own mind or one's own assumed identity. There is no cure for that. Therefore, from that basis, there's nothing that we can do. Everything we do just makes it worse. So mental health would really mean seeing the adult as a dead end. We've gone down a dead end. It doesn't go anywhere. It was a mistake. A necessary mistake. I am quite happy to accept that it's a necessary mistake. But even so, it's a mistake. So we have to go back to being natural. And yet, there's absolutely nothing we can do. No way of looking at things, no theory, no method, no skill, no contrivance, any of that garbage. None of that's going to help. So where does that leave us?